Okay, good morning, everybody. What I'd like to do today is it's quite technical actually because the Mishpatim really contains a lot of technical halachic detail. It deals a lot with laws of damages, laws of lending to other people, what we call the shomrim, those who are entrusted with an article that belongs to somebody else, how they deal with those things. So what I want to look at is one of the laws that comes in the Gemara in Baba Kama. The Gemara, the Mishnahs in Baba Kama speak about different arba avot nezikin, four types of primary categories of damage. Um, Hashor, v'habor, v'hamave, v'ahever. That's the shore, the ox, the boar. That's the pit. Hamave is not clear exactly what it is. It's the damage that is done through enjoyment, and ahever is damage that is done by fire. And each one of those is clearly defined in the Gemara, and it expands it much more. It's not about an ox; it's about an animal that damages. A boar is a pit, meaning something a person could stumble into, which is something that is stationary. The animal normally does something through some type of movement. This is stationary. Mave is where there's enjoyment, as I said, and hever is fire. Now, the thing about fire that is different from all the others is that fire is kind of a combination in a way, because you light it as whilst it's not an animate thing. It has a life because it can move by virtue of the fact that it consumes whatever is in its path, and that gives it its fuel. So that being the case, says the Torah, it's the Torah in Shmot Chaf Bet, the following: Kitetze H. If a fire would come out, umatzah kotzim, and the fire finds kotzim are thorns, v'ne'echal gadish, and then it moves from those thorns and ne'echal gadish, it destroys a mound of some type of some type of produce. So if it's so you've got a fire, the fire comes and the fire moves from the way the Torah presents it. It moves from the thorns, having lit up the thorns, then moves from there to the gadish, to like a stacked place. Then or hakama, or it goes to corn or wheat that is standing, or asadeh, or destroys a whole field. Shalem yeshalem, you have to pay. Who pays? Hamavir esabeira, the one who started the fire. So Rashi says very simply, kitetza esh, afilu me'atzma. Even if a fire goes on its own, it's not that I direct the fire, but somehow I'm responsible for the fact that that fire started in some way or another. Matza'at katzim, and it finds thorns. So kotzim are thorns. Now we understand that, and this is important for later, when in the beginning of Shemot, it spoke about how the Bnei Yisrael were like a thorn in the side of the Egyptians. A thorn, when the Torah speaks about a thorn, it's not just talking about thorns, it's talking about something that hurts, that pushes, that's irritating. Okay, that's on a higher level. Let's call it, not on the pshat level. V'nechal gadish, and it destroys this gadish. Shelichacha bakotzim ad she'igia legadish. What happens is it consumes the thorns, but then it moves from the thorns into this pile of grain of some sort. Or lakama hamechuberet bakarka, not only to a gadish, which is where the produce is disconnected from the ground, but even to grain that is still growing. That's where Rashi explains it. Or hasadeh, or in actual fact, it destroys the entire sadeh. The field itself. Let's say it's the fire kind of like goes through into a furrow that's just been redone. It's just been plowed, but because the fire is so powerful, it actually hardens the soil and it doesn't make it usable any longer, which means that there's a certain level of damage, not only to the grain itself, but to the field, because the farmer has to redo the field, has to redo the plowing. Then what? So the Torah says, Shalem Shalem Hamavir. Hamavir etz habeira. So it says Rashi, Afal bish hidlik b'tzorch shaloi. Why do I have to pay? for the fire that I lit in my field. Let's say I was burning up some compost or whatever the case is in my field. I lit it in my field. Why? And then somehow it got to your field. Why do I have to pay for your field? So says the Rashi. Even though he lit it in his own field, the fire went on its own. Because it connected to these thorns, and the thorns then connected to the Gadish, and etc. etc. You know why you have to pay? Obviously, because you were not careful enough. You didn't guard your fire that it wouldn't connect to the thorns, and then it wouldn't connect, and then ultimately to the Gadish or to the Kama, because you are negligent in not making sure that things were okay. So that's the basic technical aspects of it. But there's so much discussion on what this fire is. Fire could be many things. According to the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, he wants to say that the fire we're talking about is the fire of the Yetzer Hara. And that's what's kotzim. It's deep. It digs and digs and digs. But then what happens is that it becomes the Rishoim, those who the negative people, that the fire of the Yetzer Hara empowers the Rishaim, those people who are not trying to follow the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when they get their power, the environment around them gets consumed as well. And that's why we have to be so careful about the environment in which we put ourselves into, because the environment is so powerful. And the Yetzer Hara is so powerful that it can consume in that way. Comes along the Pnei David. The Pnei David is the Chidah. He is very, very well known, very powerful Kabbalistic Rav Chaim Yosef David Azulai. He lived in the late 1700s, and he says the following, quoting the pasuk. He says, "Efshal yirmoz." He says, maybe we can find a hint of tochot musar ala machloket, that this can be a space of musar, a space of ethical teaching on a machloket, on concept of machloket. Ki hein ka'avon sha'machloket naze gadol ba, or shechas v'shalom yesiba le'betirat yitzadik. Says, the power of machloket is so huge that it could even, God forbid, lead to the death of somebody, or ibud mammon, or it could lead to a person losing money, or ibud limud, or a person could lose their learning of Torah. It is so powerful, machlokas. And he says, that's why it says, kitetza eish kasheyit, or machloket, an eish, that fire, that passion, is the passion of machlokas. V'yatchil hatchola levad. So you know what, let's just start a little bit of fire. But what happens is that because the sitra achra, the power of machlokas, is something that belongs to the power of the Yetzer Hara, to the Satan, it belongs not in the space of kedusha. Because of that, it's waiting to make itself bigger. And what happens is matzakosim. It finds thorns. It'll find something difficult. Always, every single one of us in our relationships have things that perhaps irritate us about different people, about different things. That is what the fire will find. Those little thorns that are irritating, and it will combust those things. And you know what happens? When the thorns combust, then everything starts getting consumed. And the way that the Pnei David explains that the Gadish, this already harvested pile of grain, that's the tzaddik. Hakama, that's Hakama, the next one, the standing corn, that's mammon, that's money. And he quotes psukim to prove all of that. Or Sadeh, what is the Sadeh? The Sadeh is kinui leTalmud. The Sadeh is a nickname for the learning of Torah. V'agam kil kol ze nimshach akarchach mimele lo tema gam yishitchil b'machlokas ein ba'avod. So you have to understand that all of this destruction starts with that little bit of machlokas. Because at the end of the day, machlokas doesn't measure the amount of damage that it does; it just damages. And because it just damages, and we have to be responsible, and we have to take responsibility, and we have to be accountable for any machlokas that we create. We, as human beings, we have a halacha of shomer. We have a halacha of We have to guard things. We have to take responsibility. We have to be careful about other people's things, be it person's life, be it their mammon, their money, be it their learning. We have to make that. And even even if originally it was negligent, and because the shtickle machloikas, at the end of the day, that small amount of negligence creates such an enormous damage, says the Pnei David. It's a terrible thing for us. And so therefore, what comes along this pasuk is not just teaching us that that obviously the restitution, if we make fire, we cause damage, but ki h, when fire goes out, when machloikas is created, when we have to understand the power of Lashon Hora in its real sense. Lashon Hora, remember, if we remember, Lashon Hora is not telling lies. Lashon Hora is telling the truth. But Lashon Hora, the purpose of Lashon Hora is to incite animosity between different people, is to create machloikas. Ki eish, and it goes out. And it matzah kotzim. And it'll always find whenever, and they'll always find something to ignite. And that's why, and that is why, when it comes to Lashon Hora, even if we're saying nice things, we have to be careful, because there might be kotzim in a relationship, might be those thorns in the relationship that people will take on, and people will take them on and use them as a means of machlokas. Please God, we should not be able to create any fires, and please God, we should always be able to share wonderful things and not machlokas. Have a beautiful day.